Welcome in to another edition of the JMU Sports News Podcast. I am Bennett Conlin, joined by Jack Fitzpatrick. And the Dukes, they keep on winning.
People are going to go to war for these Dukes, folks. War is imminent, according to the Virginia state legislature, and the Dukes' revenge tour is over.
I mean, questionable wording given sort of current events, but hey, Virginia is willing to go to war for JMU's bowl eligibility, even though they may actually end up in a bowl, regardless of how it all plays out.
Yeah, you gotta love it. And while you're watching all of this unfold, you can drink 3-notched beer on Tuesdays. No, on Mondays. It's Minuteman Monday. I'm taking your steam. I'm already missing it.
Go for it. It up. Just fire away.
Minuteman Monday. Tuesday they do something. First Tap Friday, they got $3 new beer.
Tuesday, the cases are half off.
That's right.
So shout out to them. Deal. Shout out to 3-Notch. We love 3-Notch. And we'll be there for our live podcast on November 17th. Yep, Friday, November 17th. You can see it on the screen there if you are watching live at the 3-Notch Valley Collab House in Harrisonburg. That's 5 p.m., so a couple hours before men's basketball tips off against Radford, and then a day before JMU football plays App State. So it should be a heck of a weekend.
Yeah, come check us out. It's going to be a live podcast kind of setup, but not really a podcast where it's talking. It's going to be more of a discussion-based type of thing. The podcast will then be posted to all podcast platforms. So if you can't make it out, you can hear what we discussed. But come on out, $3 pours of their first tap, and then you can get some really great beer. Otherwise, I'll probably be sipping on some Emperor Duke of Clouds, maybe some King of Clouds action. Maybe I'll just be chugging whatever their first tap is. They recently just launched Biggie S'mores. They're kind of like big time imperial stout. I think they just released a bourbon barrel aged version of Biggie S'mores too, for their 10th anniversary. But a lot of awesome stuff coming down the pipe. So be on the lookout for that at 3-Notched, and mark your calendars for November 17th, 5 p.m. 3-Notched Valley Collab House for that live podcast.
There's a reason Christopher William Jewelers has been voted best of Virginia year after year. It's not just one thing that sets us apart. It's everything. It's the selection, extensive and unmatched, with every engagement ring, loose diamond, and fashion jewelry chosen for quality and brilliance. It's the service. From our diamond experts to our master goldsmith, our team shares a passion for what they do, and it shows. It's the atmosphere, both glamorous and laid back. See for yourself why people can't stop talking about Christopher William Jewelers in Harrisonburg and Weir's Cave.
The last of the major pro sports leagues kick off this week. The kickoff actually tips off, I should say, tomorrow. And Bet Online is your number one spot for all of your NBA betting action this season. You got the MLB postseason right now. You got the NFL regular season. Shout out Seahawks for beating the Cardinals. Shout out Ravens for just smacking the Lions.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. College football, NHL, all of it is in full swing. Bet Online, number one source for your wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. As a quick aside, you were all over, though, the Ravens at -3. So how bad of a Sunday was it, actually?
Not that bad. I thought they were going to lose that game for sure. Didn't think they would get embarrassed quite the way that they did. But, yeah, I thought they were going to lose that. A little banged up, and then Baltimore, I feel like, was probably underrated going into that. They're probably a better team than Detroit.
Yeah, very much so. Maybe not better than Detroit, but they're like one of the best teams in the AFC.
They're good.
Get everything NBA at your fingertips, both desktop, mobile access for every sport, anytime. Head to Bet Online today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, promo code BLEAV to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts.
Action-packed podcast coming up, folks. It's taking a minute to gather my thoughts there.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to take that one, but
20-9 over Marshall, in what was really, in hindsight, kind of a dominating game. They were very disappointing in the red zone, which made it like not dominant at times. But I feel like overall, what the yardage differential was pretty significant. It was like low 400s to sub 200 for Marshall. They they got in the Stats of War graphic, right? And they were very high up there.
I think we're in the top 5 of teams. So that Stats of War graphic, I tweet it out whenever I see it. It takes the net success rate. So what your success rate was, the winning team minus from the losing team, and that difference, the net success rate, is how badly you dominated the team. So essentially it takes out any quote unquote luck plays, like big explosive chunk plays, things that happened on special teams that may have been advantageous to you. And essentially it shows if you were to play this game 100 times, like there's one team that probably is going to win it more times than not, and the other team won't because of luck. And JMU, so like if you have a negative net success rate, you probably won't win that game more often than not. But if you, depending on how much your net success rate is, you'll win that game more often. And JMU blew the doors off of Marshall in that category. And I mean, kind of across the stats too. When you look at the box score, Jordan McLeod vastly outperformed Cam Fancher. Tyson Lawton and Kalon Black outperformed Ethan Payne. Was worth noting, Rasheen Ali missed the game. He was an injury scratch like right before kickoff. So something about this Marshall JMU game that has stars that are mysteriously ruled out right before the game. Reggie Brown and Elijah Surratt and Phoenix Sproles, all of them outperformed any Marshall receiver. And defensively, it was a program history setting day with Jalen Green's 5 sacks. So it was 3-2 at halftime, but I mean, it never felt like Marshall was going to have a chance to move the ball like at all.
Yeah, they didn't score offensively, right? So they had the kickoff return for a touchdown and then the safety. There were a lot of drives starting with inside the 5-yard line for both teams. A lot of drives starting at the 1-yard line for both teams.
Only one team was able to convert on that for a safety.
Yeah, so Marshall, I thought hung in there pretty well. I was actually kind of impressed given the injuries they've had, sort of how competitive the Thundering Herd were and the level they played at for the most part. I thought they were like decently impressive.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good win. I thought it was a really good win, like up there with Georgia Southern in terms of feeling like a very complete, solid performance.
I almost kind of feel more confident after the Marshall game than the Georgia Southern game, because Georgia Southern, we knew they had some question marks on defense. You knew they could kind of get got. And it kind of looking at the game from last year, JMU had 4 turnovers, a block punt that was returned for a touchdown against Georgia Southern. And you're like, okay, well, if you only have 3 turnovers, you win that game. If you don't let them have a block punt touchdown, you win that game. So to me, that game was more one-sided towards JMU. This game, though, looking at it, I really thought Marshall and JMU were kind of neck and neck in terms of ability. And the fact that Marshall's offense couldn't get anything going at all was eye-opening to me, because this is a secondary that has come a long way from what they were like just a few short weeks ago. And now all of a sudden, and I know Cam Fancher and the passing attack isn't that lethal from the Thundering Herd. And I know Rasheen Ali was out, but with all things considered, this is a JMU secondary that would have let Cam Fancher throw for 300 yards a month ago. And they held him to sub 200, made him look terrible, and they were just all over him. And the fact that they didn't let an offensive touchdown up is wildly impressive.
Yeah, the secondary is getting a lot better, and then the pass rush just like hasn't let up all season. I mean, they've been dominant. Jalen Green, you mentioned the 5 sacks is just absurd. The defensive line stats are actually pretty humorous when you look at like the entire team. So you've got 3 guys who have double-digit tackles for loss this year. None of them are James Carpenter, right? Like that's absurd. So he's sort of in a role, I guess, where he's not quite the stat guy, right? He sort of just eats up blocks in the middle. But Jalen Green has 18 tackles for loss in 7 games. Kamara has 13 and Chroma has 11. Then Carpenter's right there with 6.5. But I mean, just unbelievable to have, play 7 games. You got 3 guys with double-digit tackles for loss. I mean, like Kamara, 13 tackles for loss and 4.5 sacks. And everyone's like, okay, but have you seen what Jalen Green's doing? Like, that's what's so impressive is they have 4 guys who are dominating. And then you sort of throw in Bush and Tucker as guys you can rotate in. It's just a hell of a 6.
JMU is also holding opponents to 1.2 rush yards per game, and that starts and ends with the front 7, specifically the front 4. They're allowing 253 rush yards on the season.
That's crazy.
There are some Sunbelt teams that allow 253 rush yards a game. JMU in 7 games, 4 conference games, has held opponents to 253 rush yards total. And that kind of factors in some of the sacks. So on the ground, taking out yards lost, they've allowed 583 rush yards this season. And then they've had negative 330 rush yards this year. Insane numbers, insane productivity from the front 4.
It's nuts. That 1.2, whatever yards per pop is the best in college football, right? I think
No,
the
it's
total
not.
Right. Sorry, it doesn't appear on the NCAA
It
website.
doesn't exist. That 1.2 will never be. Isn't that kind of sad? I kind of get the transitioning rule. I do think it is stupid when you're going from FCS to FBS that your stats just don't count. I also think it's stupid when you go D2 to D1, but like this is a historic performance, and
yeah,
it just won't be remembered in history.
Well, it's like especially in year 2, right? Because JMU's year 1 was abnormal, but like Jacksonville State and Sam Houston had like nonsense schedules last year.
Yeah.
Where like JMU's playing the Sun Belt East, the 2 best teams in the West, like a Power 5 team, Mountain West team, and they're non-conference, and they get UConn and Bucknell. But like it's a pretty good schedule, especially for a group of 5 team. To not include it is stupid. Where it's like, well, they're transitioning. It's like yes, but they're acting as a full FBS member. They just don't have postseason. It's silly to not put it on the website when Jalen Green's leading the country in sacks.
That and you're holding opponents to 1.2 rush yards per game. That is insane.
I think that's per carry. I think.
What did I say?
Per game.
Did I say per game?
Yeah. It's low per game, isn't it? Like it's whatever it is leading the country. I think it's higher than 1.2.
Thank you for correcting that. It is 1.2 per attempt.
They have kept.
That's it. My bad. It's 36.1 per game,
which is absurd. But then it's a couple teams I think have been. Wasn't Marshall negative rushing?
I think they were -4. They may have finished the game at -4.
That's insane, right? And obviously sacks are playing a huge role in that, but it's still unbelievable.
So they held Troy to -12 rush yards, which he's the best. Kamani Vidal is the best running back in the Sun Belt.
Unbelievable.
No, he might be one of the best running backs in the entire nation.
Yeah, he's really.
They held Marshall to -4 with their backup running back, but still otherworldly. They held a Power 5 team to 18 yards, and they held South Alabama, another really good offense, to 27 rush yards. The most yards allowed this season was 98 against Utah State because they had a 35-yard run.
Nobody getting over 100 as a transitioning team feels insane. Like you're not supposed to be that good in the trenches.
The longest rush they've allowed is 35 is 35 yards.
Jeez.
Like for comparison's sake, JMU's longest rush of the season was 57 yards. And JMU's bad at running the football.
You could probably find a bunch of games where, well, obviously if the team's in the negative though, where JMU's like longest run is significantly more than an opponent's like total rushing yards. Maybe
you want to go through game
other
by
than
game?
like the 98, right? Because I don't think they had a 99-yard run against Utah State.
Yeah. Against Utah State, their longest run was 16 yards.
That checks out.
that was a rough game.
It's funny too, is they're not that good at like running the ball. JMU, like they're not bursting out a lot of long runs.
That's what I was saying. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of sad. But to focus back onto the Marshall game, McLeod goes down with an injury, comes back in. I have a question for you, and I'm going to throw this up for our our viewers on Twitter live stream, YouTube live stream, Facebook live stream, wherever you're watching, has Cignetti finally accepted that McLeod is good?
I think there's a lot more trust there than there was at the beginning of the year. And he's definitely playing better than he was at the beginning of the year, but he also wasn't like bad at the beginning. He's been really good.
He's been one of the best quarterbacks outside of TJ Finley. He's been the best quarterback in the Sun Belt.
Yeah, he's been really, really good. And he's got some defenses coming up that I think he has a chance to kind of beat up on, but super impressed with him. And then it feels like they started to actually like use his legs.
Yes.
In a way that makes sense the last like 3 or 4 games.
And he's been holding on those read options a little bit more.
That helps, yeah.
Which I think is him just comfortable in the offense. So being more comfortable with his own body, because it is kind of insane that the last time he took a snap before Bucknell in a live game action, he destroyed his leg. So
speaking of comfortable in his body, I don't think I've seen a quarterback play for JMU in a while who is more willing to get just crushed in the pocket, like standing in for a throw.
Yeah, I didn't know.
You didn't know where I was going with that. Then McLeod. It's weird though, because you mentioned it like maybe you have to gain trust on the leg. It's like for running, it seems that way. For passing, he just like stands in and gets obliterated and is like, oh, like.
And sometimes I wish he didn't. Sometimes I wish he like rolled out. Like the one hit he took where it looked like he may have. I'm not a doctor. Let's call it a hyperextended knee. It kind of got pushed to the wrong angle. In that scenario, like, I don't know, maybe a pump fake and roll out. I know this is me armchair quarterbacking a few days post game. And at the end of the day, it was a completion for a huge gain and you only missed like a drive. But maybe you kind of like move in the pocket a little bit more. He's a great pocket passer, and it's hilarious because he's also the team's best runner.
Yeah, when he's in space, he's doing a lot of good things. He's making great throws. The deep balls, I didn't think he'd be that good throwing deep balls this year. I assumed he'd be pretty good in like those intermediate and short routes. Throwing some great deep balls to Reggie Brown, who had another like bounce back game. He's been really good kind of outside of the South Alabama game. Phoenix Sproles was involved.
Thank you. Love Phoenix. He's been getting more involved the last few weeks too.
It feels like they've kind of figured out McLeod and the offense and what they want to do, which I guess kind of makes sense since he was QB2 in the camp, which still does not make sense, but whatever.
A lot of things from that fall camp don't make sense, like that and no tackling, because finally it looks like they can tackle.
Yeah, they just seem a lot
better.
Yeah, especially after the bye. I feel like they've come out of the bye playing really good football. It's exciting because I was worried after those first few that was just sort of who they were, where they would get some great spurts and then struggle. They seem to be playing significantly more consistent, like 60-minute football.
Yeah, I think that Marshall game too was a full 60 minutes of needing everything to play well together in order to win that game 20-9. Your offense wasn't doing great in the first half, but your defense sets up the offense in some advantageous situations. You're able to get those 3 points to go into the break 3-2. And then in the second half, your offense scores 17 points, and they look pretty good doing it. Jordan McLeod is hurt. He comes back in. He continues to play, and they put up some points. I think it was a very great game that was extremely complimentary. I liked the play calling. I liked the utilization of Phoenix Sproles a lot. I've loved his utilization the last 2 weeks. Seeing him involved more is, I think, really important to the offense because I think it opens up a lot. Like just having a slot receiver that can play well.
Yeah, especially he does a really nice job when he catches the ball. There's not a ton of like dancing around, or like you watch some teams and a guy will catch the ball like for 8 yards on 1st and 10, and then he tries to avoid a guy and ends up only gaining like 4 yards because he just runs backwards. When he gets it, he just like goes forward, makes progress. It's just very like simple and efficient movement, which is kind of nice from your slot receiver.
Yeah, and I think you have a Heisman candidate that you want to bring up, right?
Yes. Ryan Hansen put on a clinic at the punter position. One of the best performances I've seen. It sort of explains, to be honest with you, some of the like very conservative punting decisions where it's like, oh, like you think he can down him at the 1 like multiple times. And he did in this one. He was unbelievable. McLeod wanted to get in the action too, threw an interception that got down on the 1. Little Ryan Hansen shout out for him, I think, with that mistake. So there was a lot of positives though in the game, but I thought Hansen stood out maybe the most of like any JMU player.
Ryan Hansen this season, 1 touchback And you know what
Yeah.
that touchback was?
UVA,
A mistake by the gunner.
Yeah, or they butchered it. He lands it at the 1. They like catch it and just jump into the end zone like with the ball in their hands. That's
Like,
unbelievable.
this guy is absurd. And when you have a defensive front 7, a defensive front 4 as good as JMU's, I know they didn't get a safety against Marshall, but like you like your odds that a team can't drive 99 yards against you and you're putting them in a serious spot of potentially getting a safety.
Just an unbelievable performance. 7
Also,
punts all inside, I think the 11.
yeah.
And then there were multiple at the 1. I think 6 of them were like inside the 10. Just a clinic. And they did a decent job like gunning it and getting down there. There were a few. There was one that was like a pinball machine where it like bounced, and I think Hudson just like swatted it back, and it was like looked kind of clunky, but it worked. They did a really nice job with it, and I think you floated the idea that he might be one of their like most impactful transfers in recent years.
I did say that, and I kind of worded it in a way where I wouldn't be called a disgrace to the university like people in the past have called me.
That's true.
For making pretty broad generalizations. But I think Ryan Hansen is the most impactful transfer of the Kurt Signetti era, at least, for the main reason that he is such a conservative play caller and a conservative coach 9 times out of 10. He's gone for it a few times on 4th down, and I absolutely love it. But for the most part, he's a conservative coach. So if you have a kicker that is kicking these as touchbacks, you're losing 20 yards of field position each and every time. So for every single time that Ryan Hansen is getting it downed inside the 5, if you have an average punter, let's say half of those go into the end zone, then all of a sudden you're looking at like 200 yards lost that like don't show up on the box score. And that's so important in a game where you're playing against these Marshalls of the Sun Belt East. You're playing against the App States, the Southerns, the States, whoever it may be in your entire schedule. Ryan Hansen's ability to pin teams deep is kind of, I know it's not unsung because here we are singing his praises. You saw it all over Twitter, but I'm not sure if fans 100% understand, and even myself understand the importance he has to this team as a whole. Special teams has been kind of the Achilles heel for JMU the last 5 years. It wasn't the Achilles heel on against, kind of was with the kickoff return touchdown. But like punt team is looking amazing.
Yeah, he's been really good. There's a question later that we'll get to, but it's actually kind of interesting that Hansen is putting himself sort of in that special teams player of the year conversation.
Again,
kind of asses Camden Wise. Like if he doesn't miss a field goal, it's kind of incredible to go from like the offseason where we're like, look, they got to figure something out on special teams. And the kickoff return touchdown was not great. But outside of that, they have 2 blocked punts this season. Hansen's one of the best punters in the conference. Wise is one of the best kickers in the conference. They've had some decent punt returns at times. They've done a lot of things very, very well.
Yeah,
on special teams, which I'm impressed with.
For sure. Was there anything else we had to shout out from that Marshall game?
I just thought it was a great performance, one of their best of the season. And then I thought the broadcast was interesting. Where the
you mean bad?
Well, no, I just thought the end they just went in on the NCAA for like.
Oh wait, the broadcast. I was thinking the refereeing. Sorry.
No, the officiating is always college football. But
I have a conspiracy theory that I want to hit you with after you talk about Matt Barry.
I was going to say they just went in maybe more than I expected. I knew they would mention the like postseason ineligibility. I didn't think they would just like bludgeon the NCAA for like 5 minutes late in the game. And that's what they did. So interesting for sure, and helped spark some conversations, I think.
Yeah. Here's my conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Do you think the Sun Belt has sent something out to all the referees that says try to make it where JMU loses?
I don't think that they're jeopardizing competitive integrity. So I would say no. But I like the conspiracy theory. And you're not the first one to float it. I feel like we get it in our mentions where they're like, oh, of course the Sun Belt wants them to lose. I do think the Sun Belt wants them to lose. Like
I do too.
At the top of the it'd be best if Georgia State like
wins on the 4th. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For like the Sun Belt League office, right? You don't have to worry about the JMU storyline anymore. Your team, like your East champion picks up a win over like there's a lot of positives to that.
Although after all of this stuff that we've gotten with the college football playoff that they sent us in the statement yesterday,
yeah,
the Sun Belt's getting a lot of unnecessary heat.
Yeah, what are they supposed to do?
There's literally nothing they can like. Let JMU play in the championship game and like not go to a New Year's Six. How bad would it look if the Sun Belt champion is in the Bahamas Bowl? How bad would
Yeah.
it look if they're in the New Era Pinstripe Bowl?
It's
How
just
bad
like,
would it look if they're in the Meineke Car Care Bowl? Sorry, I'm done.
well, it's like whoever the champion is going to play in some crappy early December bowl, but you want that team to get a little extra shine
Yeah.
because JMU can't go to the New Year's Six based on what we heard from the college football playoff committee spokesperson because they can't be ranked by the college football playoff committee. So when they reveal those rankings and you're a JMU fan, don't get offended. Where are they? They can't be ranked because they're not ranking any NCAA eligible teams. You also won't see 0-7 Sam Houston on those rankings for that reason.
Yeah, for that reason. People have said that playing Sam Houston State after a bye week's a trap game.
What an insane logic.
Speaking of trap games, this weekend, ODU comes to Harrisonburg for the Royal Rivalry Part 2. Say that 5 times fast. So the 3-Notch Weekly preview with the Monarchs. This is a team that allows a lot of sacks, and they're going up against a JMU defense that likes to sack the quarterback a whole hell of a lot. When these two teams faced off last year at ODU, JMU absolutely dominated, and Todd Centeio was named like the Oyster Shucker MVP of the Year award. And it was an absolutely gorgeous day to watch the Monarchs lose. This year, I'm kind of feeling a little bit of the same. I don't think ODU matches up well in this game at all. Their quarterback is not very efficient. Their offense is not very efficient. But this is a Monarchs team that is a little bit more frisky than I think we initially expected coming off of a win against App State. What are you expecting this weekend in Harrisonburg, Virginia?
We're going to need like a Jordan McLeod Oyster player of the game graphic if they go on and win this one. But I think it's one that Old Dominion's been impressively scrappy this year. 4-3 for the Monarchs, despite not really looking all that talented or that good sort of outside of Jason Henderson at linebacker. Their offense is weird. Like their scheme is really cool. And I think it could be an elite scoring offense in future years, but the personnel like doesn't quite fit it right. And it looks a little bit clunky at times. It's not great. Like they don't seem like they're good anywhere. And then they just sort of find ways to grit out some wins. At the same time, I think this is a very challenging matchup against probably the best team that Old Dominion has faced all year. I think JMU matches up really well in terms of the defensive line against ODU's offensive line, which you mentioned gives up more sacks than any team in college football. And then against the pass, ODU has really struggled stopping teams from completing a high percentage of passes for a whole bunch of yards. That's kind of what JMU does best offensively. It feels just like a horrendous matchup for Old Dominion, which makes me think JMU has a good chance of not only winning, but maybe covering that 17.5-point spread.
Is ODU good at stopping the run?
They have some nice run stopping stats.
They have some really nice run stopping stats. I mean, according to EPA, they are the 7th best team on a per play basis. They're the 2nd best team on a per game basis when stopping the run. But against the pass, they're not that great. It's also interesting because they face 40 rush plays a game. So teams are like running it against them a lot and not passing it that much. But their pass defense is absolutely abysmal, allowing 0.25 EPA per play. For comparison's sake, a JMU secondary that we have been really down on for a majority of this season is averaging a negative 0.10 EPA per play, which is really good.
I do kind of love that JMU's passing defense is 20th nationally in success rate. So we kind of rag on the secondary. JMU just feels like a complete team outside of the offensive running game, which it seems like they should maybe just avoid almost entirely against Old Dominion and could come out with a nice win.
And you know what the really nice thing about that is? We were worried about specific matchups in the Georgia Southern game, and we were hoping they were going to target the secondary more, and they came out and they did it. Like, this is a coaching staff that I fully expect to know these numbers and be like, if we run it 15, 20 times, I'm okay with that. If we can gash them through the air, Jordan McLeod is really clinical with his passes. He's not making stupid mistakes. Then boom.
Sproles, Reggie Brown, Surratt feels like a bunch of potential mismatches on the outside. I feel confident in JMU's receivers in this one.
So we talked about the Jordan McLeod injury a little bit earlier. Tyler T just dropped this in the YouTube chat, and I think this is a really good idea, good thought process. Are we at all worried Signetti will be completely dark on the McLeod injury, and then at 8:00 Saturday night we see Billy Atkins trot out there? Is this a legitimate worry, Bennett?
I don't think so. He got banged up, came in and played. They also had, and it's kind of alarming that we have not mentioned this before now. They had a mini bye, so they should be extremely well rested after the mini bye and ready to go. I don't think that's a concern at all in terms of his injury status.
And to kind of throw it back real quick to the Marshall game, because I thought you were going to say we didn't even mention this. We do need to mention this really quickly. The interesting kind of poker game that Signetti's playing with his quarterback room. The QB1 to start the season is now the QB4, and the QB2 is now the QB1, with the QB4 becoming the QB2. Did I get that right? And Brett Griffiths this entire time has been QB3.
It's possible that that's what's happened. Yeah, it's unclear, but Billy Atkins came in. I think he was 1 for 2.
He was.
Nice throw to Reggie Brown, and then he bounced a screen pass. But they seem to have a little more confidence in him. So to be honest with you, if there was a crazy situation like that,
don't say it. Don't say it.
I think they still win the game. I think Billy Atkins goes out and throws for 350, 400 yards.
All right. So this ODU game, we both expect to win. We'll get to our picks later, but do you expect to win in this game?
Yeah, it seems like a pretty nice matchup.
Yeah, I'm not really, famous last words, but I'm not really worried about this game. The fact that they're 130th nationally in EPA per play, like McLeod should have a career day. Now I'm not going to say if he throws for less than 300 yards, I'm going to be upset, but I fully expect this man to go out there and toss 4 tutties for 300 yards and them not to even try running the football.
I think a lot of things would have to go wrong for them to lose. Like, it's homecoming night game against a rival. You should have an electric, at least first half atmosphere in like a really favorable matchup. A team that gives up more sacks than anyone in the country is just an absolute dream for a defensive line that has, as we mentioned, 3 guys with double-digit tackles for loss.
Yeah. Sorry, I was answering a question in the comments. QB 2, 3, and 4 are all freshmen, right? Billy Atkins is a sophomore, correct?
He's been around for a few years. Signetti likes to mention that too, where he's like, he should know what's going on. He's been around for
So kind of looking at everything, we talked about it a little bit, but what's been the key to the Duke's offensive success in your opinion? Is it the trust, or is it?
Yeah, it's the trust, right? And kind of leaning away from the running game, maybe, I think has been really good. What do you think?
Oh, thank you so much for that amazing segue. I agree. I think it's the trust, and I think it's utilizing kind of quicker developing passes that act almost as a running attack.
Yeah.
Using that more has really helped this team. And I think the easy completions build up the confidence of Jordan McLeod and help him get going as well. But great segue. Where's the panic meter for the rushing attack? I got to hit you with some numbers here.
Oh, no.
I wrote them down in my handy dandy notebook. So are you ready for this?
Yeah, this is going to be scary, isn't it?
Against Marshall, I'm going to use a statistic that you love, that you tried to figure out last week. But against Marshall, Tyson Lawton and Kalon Black both had a negative EPA per play. So on a per rush basis, every time they were handed the ball, you could see in the case of Tyson Lawton, 0.29 points come off of the scoreboard. And every time Kalon Black got handed the ball, you could see essentially half of a point go off the scoreboard. The bright spot is that Jordan McLeod, he had a 0.86 EPA per rush, which is better than if you took both of Black and Lawton, combined them up together. You know what I mean? On the season, there is now not a single running back on this roster that has a positive EPA per play. Tyson Lawton was flirting around there, but he's now dropped that negative threshold. And as a team, they have a negative 0.14 EPA per rush with a 35.6% success rate. All of those numbers, I just threw them at you. I just want to put this, if you're a college football fan, you follow JMU, and some of these numbers are like, what does this even mean? I want to put it and kind of contextualize it with an NFL team, because I feel like we know what the good offenses are in the National Football League. We know which ones are bad. The negative 0.14 EPA per play is about on par with what the Jets and Steelers rushing attack are doing, around the 28 to 29 range. And that 35.6% success rate would rank dead last in the NFL by 3%. I know the success rate, like the Jets have the worst success rate. So essentially we have the Jets rushing attack.
It's not good. It has not been good. So I'm a little bit concerned. I do kind of like that they're almost going away from it at certain spots. But like even just like baseline numbers, Kalon Black 16 carries for 33 yards against Marshall. Ugh. That's not good. Tyson Lawton 11 for 35. Ugh. Like it feels like they were getting them early in the game and had some nice runs. And then after that, they couldn't do anything. Latrell Palmer has 2 carries over the last 3 weeks. Like, I don't know if we're going to see him again, but it's crazy.
Well, he has a negative 0.32 EPA per rush, by far the worst on the team.
I'm sure seeing that he sits them down in like player meetings. And he's like, look, you want to get your EPA per play number up? I'll give you plenty of carries. It's just it's shocking because it's one that like if they had this level of balance offensively, they'd be scary. But they're still scary.
This all just makes me realize how elite Percy was.
Is that what the problem is? You think just like pure like guys making guys miss or turning a 5-yard run into a 15-yard run, or is it blocking?
I think it's a couple of things. I think the main issue is the line play. I think losing Kidwell is a huge blow because now you've played a lot of games without Nick Kidwell, and ever since he's gone, the rushing attack really hasn't gotten going. I also think it's just guys not doing exactly what they need to do. I just don't think it's perfect execution on a down-to-down, rush-to-rush basis, and because of that, they just can't find any consistency. I just don't think they have a rhythm. I think not having a dude like Percy was really hurts, and I think we may have oversold the run blocking of this offensive line.
It definitely seems that way. They're doing a nice job protecting McLeod, but yeah. And Percy was, as you mentioned, very, very good. So I think interesting last year, you look at like the yards per carry numbers. Nobody who got more than 10 carries was over 5 except for Percy, who was at 5.7. He got the most carries of anyone on the team. He just seemed to constantly be productive. He was somebody he had that nice blend of like the ability to break tackles with his power, but also speed. That I guess maybe Black and Lawton is just a little bit less, and you sort of notice it. Especially they haven't had the same level of like cupcakey games. Like Black was dominant against Bucknell, but that last year, like the Texas State and the Arkansas State games were super helpful for the running attack, and they've gone up against some teams this year that are pretty solid against the run for the most part. So I wonder maybe they can find some stuff against like I don't know, UConn. But is there anything else the rest of the year running wise, or is it just like they show off against a really overmatched opponent?
So do you want to know an interesting piece of information?
Yes, always.
An interesting piece of information. That is what I said. Percy last year had a 0.08 EPA per rush.
Yeah.
Only guy who was negative. Only guy who was positive of the running backs last year. Kalon Black had a negative 0.28 EPA per rush. Latrell Palmer had a negative 0.29 EPA per rush. So yeah. I think it just might be kind of par for the course with having a negative EPA per rush. But the fact that it seems so low, and it just seems like they're banging their heads against the wall over and over and over and over again.
Do you think that at the FBS level, the fans have kind of just assumed that the running attack is still good because the offense and the team wins? Like you just don't, when you beat Georgia Southern 41-13, or you beat Marshall 20-9, you're not going to be like, oh wow, they didn't generate enough running plays. You're going to be like, what a dominant defensive performance with a solid game by McLeod. You just like block out the running game. Like, why did we assume that it was going to be good this year? And it's just not.
That's actually a really great question. I think part of it is, I mean, I just sat here and talked about the Marshall game was the best game we've played all season. That was dominant on both sides of the ball. The offense looked great when it needed to. The defense looked great all game. And it doesn't really account for the fact that the rushing attack didn't do anything. I mean, this season, they ran for 261 yards against Bucknell.
Yeah.
Since then, they haven't cracked 170. They rushed for 167 against UVA on 34 attempts. That was their best game, like by far. Since then, they haven't broken 150 rush yards.
That's wild.
And also, are we picking nits on this? Probably, because the offensive attack still looks potent. Jordan McLeod is leading a very good aerial attack, and he poses a huge threat on the ground. But it is something that's worth monitoring, because clearly their inability to rush was why they let all of those games nearly slip out of their hands, because they couldn't string together successful run after successful run after successful run. So many times they run on first and second down and put themselves behind the chains, which then puts McLeod in obvious passing downs on third down. And for as great as Jordan McLeod is, he struggles on obvious passing downs this season.
Yeah, so they kind of have to stay ahead of the chains or hit some explosive. That tends to be where they're at their best. I think this also gets extremely interesting in the offseason, where assuming Cignetti stays, because if Cignetti leaves, the offseason's interesting for the fact that, like, does the entire roster leave? But if he's still the head coach, like, do they go hard in the portal looking for running back talent, or is it like maybe mixing in an offensive lineman who's a really good run blocker? I don't know, but I wonder if they would look to the portal to try to find that spark, because it seems like their identity that they would love to have is like this great balance with a really powerful running game. And they're sort of shifting away and being like, all right, like, we got to lean on McLeod in the passing attack. But if they could have both, I think they'd be a lot more comfortable in play calling.
I think so. I think they have to lean into it. You saw what they did with Tyson Lawton. He's been electric this season for JMU out of the transfer portal. I think the unfortunate thing is he's a 6th-year senior that has a lot of miles on his tires, who came into the year a little banged up. Like, that's why he's not getting the lion's share of the workload. So I think you got to. I think you have to go into the transfer portal and look for something.
And you'll have some, you would think some options, right? Got at least Lawton leaving. Wayne Knight's in the portal. Wayne Knight is in the portal. You've got some other guys that I think might be walk-ons listed on the roster. So yeah, it was a position that I thought was maybe their strongest coming into the year, which is why I've been so surprised that they aren't getting closer to 200 yards per game.
Yeah. So that brings us to a segment Bennett texted me about. The bowl game breakdown. We heard from the College Football Playoff Committee spokesperson that JMU is not eligible for any ranking in the College Football Playoff, even if somehow they win. They're the best team out of the group of 5, and they win the Sun Belt Championship. They still would not be eligible, regardless of how everything shakes out, to be in a New Year's Six bowl. So Bennett wanted to kind of do a bowl game breakdown here, because now that we really know where JMU can and can't be come the end of the season, I think there's a lot of information still out there that is yet to be known.
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating situation for the Dukes. And I feel like a lot of fans get confused by the situation. So I think the number one thing is JMU can technically play in a bowl if there are not enough eligible teams. You become eligible essentially by going 6-6, right? You reach 6 wins, you're a 500 team. You can play in a bowl game. There are 41 bowl games, which is absurd. So you have 82 of the 133 teams. More than half of college football goes to a bowl game, but sometimes not enough teams qualify in the regular season. And you send some like 5 and 7 teams because their grades are good, essentially. Instead of that this year, or after the fact, the transitioning team can be given a spot ahead of one of those like smart schools that are really killing it in the classroom. So JMU's got a chance to play in a bowl, but it's not guaranteed. The big thing, as you mentioned, can't play in the New Year's Six, barring a late like NCAA waiver, which seems very, very unlikely. So they can play in a bowl, but it's not guaranteed, and it won't be a New Year's Six.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yes.
Can it be the Duke's Mayo Bowl?
I don't think so, because I think the issue with some of these like well-known bowls is they have the conference tie-ins that are probably going to be filled by Power Fives. My guess is the teams that don't qualify will be some group of 5s that don't get enough wins. And then you would look at probably a bowl game like before Christmas that JMU plays in if they qualify. And I think they kind of slip into wherever is open. with the bowls then probably pretty excited to take a fan base that's never played in a bowl before.
Yeah, so kind of expect what the Rocket Mortgage Bowl, the Bahamas Bowl that's not being played in the Bahamas.
Could be a Bahamas-y situation. I wonder though about who they might play, because they could actually luck into a really interesting group of 5 matchup where like maybe Liberty is not the New Year's 6 participant because their schedule is embarrassing.
And maybe like the 140th ranked out of 133 schedules.
Exactly. So maybe they play like a Liberty. Maybe they get a good team from the MAC. There's a possibility if there are multiple open spots, they could actually play Jacksonville State, which is also in the same sort of situation, which would be kind of fun if they had the 2 teams that aren't eligible playing in a bowl game. So there is a possibility they have a fun matchup. It's just not a guarantee. And I think, at least from the fan perspective, there's not a whole lot of use in screaming at the Sun Belt, especially, or really the NCAA about eligibility at this point.
So what you're telling me, JMU can't make a New Year's 6, even if the Sun Belt reversed course and allowed JMU to play in the championship game and they win the championship and they're the best group of 5 team, the college football playoff would still give them the middle finger, not give them the middle finger, I'm being aggressive, would still not allow them to play due to the NCAA rules. So JMU would then go to the next open bowl, like the first open bowl, essentially. So you fill up all the top tier ones and the bottom tier ones before going to a 5-7 smart school. They'll call up JMU and offer them the spot. Can JMU deny, or that'd be stupid?
I think they'll accept pretty much whatever. I think it's up to the bowl, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe the network or something, which of the transition teams that are eligible, which is them or Jacksonville State, they would pick. It'd be surprising to pick Jacksonville State at this point over JMU, unless like JMU goes on a 5-game losing streak or something, Jacksonville State wins out, then maybe they become like a more enticing pick.
So that's for the bowl games that don't have conference tie-ins.
I think it's one where either there's a lower level conference tie, but that conference didn't have enough ability to fill it. I also think some of the low ones have like, it could be from this conference, could be from that conference. So whatever it is, wherever those openings are, you should slide in. It just is unlikely because usually those post-Christmas games where you have Power 5 teams, you're looking at sort of the top 5 or 6 teams from a conference. So like the ACC, the SEC, the Big 12, whatever, they're going to have teams that qualify. So you're not going to slide in and be like playing a game on December 29th against like USC that just happens, like the Holiday Bowl or something. That's not likely at all. But you could slide into probably one of those group of 5 matchups.
Well, thank you so much for that bowl game breakdown, Bennett. Appreciate you. This was going to be the last time we talked about bowls for the rest of the season until we knew what JMU's bowl kind of ticket was. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the Virginia entire legislative body has decided that James Madison football is the one topic that they are going to come together over. It's not anything that actually impacts, the life of Virginian all that much. No, we're going to come together about JMU football and threaten to go to war with the NCAA to let JMU play in. So there could be a lot more updates here coming down the pipe very quickly. There might be an emergency podcast in our future, but unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which side you're on, we're going to have to keep talking about bowl games, even though we don't really want to anymore, because I would love for this all to die down and JMU just goes 12-0, goes to the Bahamas Bowl and just 50 pieces some poor MAC school.
Because a couple weeks back, I feel like for us, we're flipping course here. The reason fans were so excited was it was unclear if
yes,
if there were open spots, it was unclear if like that open spot could just be the New Year's 6. And like if you're the best group of 5 team and the Sun Belt changes its mind and you play for your conference title and you win the conference title game, could you then go to the New Year's 6 if there are open bowl spots? You slide into one of those, and then Jacksonville State and some other teams slide into the lower bowls. Was that possible? And that's what the College Football Playoff Committee said no, because the committee cannot rank an ineligible team by the NCAA, and you have to be the highest ranked group of 5 conference champion. So if you're not ranked, obviously you can't be the highest ranked, and that is the College Football Playoff Committee ranking. The AP poll is completely irrelevant for that kind of selection stuff. So a huge bummer, I think, because there was sort of that little potential carrot where it was like, wait, maybe something could happen here. Maybe the Sun Belt would change its mind, because the Dukes are if they were eligible, they're positioned better than any Sun Belt team to sort of contend for the New Year's Six spot. But it appears to be completely off the table at this point.
Yeah. Thank you for that full breakdown. That leads us to arguably the best topic, the best subject of today's podcast. It's time for the Sun Belt Weekly Pick'em. I'm coming off of a perfect week, folks. 6-0, just absolutely blowing Bennett out of the water. I could not take more joy in this. You went with App to beat ODU, probably the smart pick, for being honest. And then you went with Louisiana to beat the Panthers. Both of those games extremely close. That came down to the very end.
Yeah.
Both went my way. So I went 6-0 last week, jumping up from 53-14 to 59-14. You went from 51-16 to 55-18. So a 4-game gap between us as we turn our attention to this week's Sun Belt schedule.
That's
starting things off. Georgia State at Georgia Southern this Thursday. This is going to be an electric Thursday night game. Who do you got?
Rivalry game. This should be a fun one. I like Georgia Southern here. I'm still high on them. Georgia State's burned me in like almost every pick this year, so I'm sure they'll end up winning, which would set up a really exciting JMU Georgia State game on the 4th. But I'll take Georgia Southern. I'll take the Eagles.
I'm going to take Georgia State and the Panthers.
No surprise.
They showed me a gritty win. They showed me a gritty win against Louisiana. They went into Lafayette and they took down the Raging Cajuns 20-17. This week, they turn their attention to Statesboro, Georgia, and they are going to take down the Eagles. Give me the Panthers. Arkansas State, ULM.
Wouldn't recommend turning this one on. But I'll go with ULM. I think they get their first conference victory at home.
I love the fact that on the Sunbelt website, this time for this game is still TBA.
They're like, they might not play it.
we might just not play it. I'm going to go ULM here too, just because Monroe, Louisiana, it's a tough place to play. We've seen it give App State a ton of issues. Georgia Southern was down at one point to that was in Statesboro, Georgia. ULM's just a gritty team. You know, they know how to keep it close. They don't know how to win, but they know how to keep it close. They find out a way to win this weekend. Southern Miss at App State. App State for me.
I'll take App State as well here. I think Sean Clark realizes now that he's coaching for his job. Okay, because he was last week. I put him on a hot seat alert, and he clearly missed the memo. So he wasn't taking it seriously. He was sort of coasting. Maybe just hanging out in Virginia Beach and not taking it seriously. I think this game at home, knowing what's on the line for him, employment, he will lead them to a win.
I think just App State's the better team. Louisiana, you could have no coach on the sideline. I think App State would still win. Louisiana, South Alabama. South Alabama
might be a wagon, so I'm gonna trust it here.
Might just be a massive wagon. Coming through are the Jaguars of South Alabama from Mobile. Marshall, this is a good game. Grayson McCall's status is still up in the air after a scary hit that took him to the hospital. I don't think he's playing this weekend.
Probably not. That was crazy. I wouldn't think so.
I don't think they've officially ruled him out, though, but this is college athletics, and they will never officially rule someone out because Jalen Walker and Torres Jones were still the starters on the 2D 3 weeks after both injured themselves. I don't know who I like here, though, because Grayson McCall's been kind of meh this season.
Yeah, this game is fascinating. I thought both these teams would be better. I'm going to end up going with Marshall here because of McCall's up-in-the-air status. I think Marshall, coming off a mini-bye, gets some guys healthy, plays a little bit better, and beats Coastal.
Yeah, Coastal only put up 27 points against Arkansas State. I think Marshall and Cam Fancher figure out some sort of kind of rhythm on offense after not finding one at all for 60 minutes of game time. And the Thundering Herd pick up the win. Troy at Texas State. I'm going Texas State.
Really? Oh man, I was gonna do that, but I can't with a 4-game deficit. So I will take Troy. I will take the Trojans. They might not have a very exciting offensive scheme, but the defense gets it done.
Man, Troy hurt me earlier this season when they beat Georgia State. They're my darlings. Georgia State's been my darling. Texas State, I've been hot and cold with. I'm back on with them. So watch Troy just rip my heart out again and just destroy the Bobcats. The Fighting Everett Withers, as some call it, around San Marcos.
Some good ones this week, though. A few really nice matchups.
I mean, Troy, Texas State.
That's a good game.
You might not believe in the Bobcats, but that's a de facto kind of conference championship game, kind of. Texas State sits atop the standings, tied with Troy and South Alabama at 2-1 in the conference. Georgia State and Georgia Southern, both one loss in conference play.
Yeah.
Georgia State will need to win this to stay in the hunt for the Sun Belt, assuming JMU can beat them. JMU is probably going to be a double-digit favorite on the road against the Panthers. ODU's right there, but you seem JMU beats ODU. So you're saying all of these guys, if Georgia State can beat Georgia Southern, they're still right there in the thick of it for the Sun Belt East. A team that was picked near the bottom of the East. So much fun this weekend in the Sun Belt.
Depending on who you ask, they're actually first in the East.
Ben Moore, is that his name? Ben Moore?
Yeah, we'll get into his tweet. We should just read like 5 of his tweets next week and I'll just get your reaction.
For News or Snooze.
Yeah, let's just be Ben Moore tweets.
That brings us to News or Snooze, presented by Christopher William Jewelers. Bennett will give me 3 quotes. I'll say if they're newsworthy or snoozeworthy. Let's go.
Okay, this is we'll lead with a banger here from Virginia State Senator Louise Lucas. This is a tweet. So she asks Charlie Baker, the NCAA president, since you are new, ask around about the legislative help Virginia has had to give your organization over the years. I've been in the Senate for 32 years and can think of a number of issues you have all needed help on. Virginia will go to war on this. That's referring to JMU's postseason eligibility.
So I have so many thoughts. And I don't know if it's newsworthy or snoozeworthy. I'll say newsworthy because it's in the news and it's going to be in the news. It's going to be in the news cycle for weeks to come. But it just feels like a sad grab at a popularity ahead of elections. And also to say like you're going to war with what's happening around the world right now just seems really bad. Like everything about that, I don't approve.
Just a kind of a weird tweet out of nowhere. That's just like, I don't know what that means exactly, how they've helped the NCAA and Virginia over the last 32
it's so fucking, excuse my French there. It's so weird.
But it's all incredibly odd. Yeah, I'm with you. It's weird. And it's one that I was excited to move past the bowl stuff because JMU.
I was so excited.
It's also one where I think if you're a politician or whatever, at this point, you got to be like, okay, we're suing the NCAA. Like, you got to come with some action now, right? Some other people have already beaten you to the punch in terms of like wanting to get some popularity out of the bowl thing. So you got to come with a little action or at least a fake action item. Bring something to the table, right?
Well,
it's like showing up to a party, bring a little food. It's a potluck here. You're just showing up with the same thing. Like if the guy before brought brownies and you're bringing brownies.
Well, she's doing less than what the guy before that showed up before. The guy
before, no letter.
He wrote a letter. She's just saying we're going to war. She just added Charlie. You're new here. That's also like a little bit of a bully. It feels like they're picking on the new kid. I know we don't like Charlie Baker, but like, let's not pick on the new kid.
What does that mean? If you
also
give bowl eligibility, you're going to help him out in the future with what?
We talked about this off air. What are you suing for? That they're upholding their rules?
I don't know what the lawsuit is. Everyone's like antitrust. I don't know what. Sure. Show me the lawsuit and then we'll see if it's nonsense. Or threaten one. Give me a real one. You know what I mean? Not like a sternly written letter.
No, not a sternly written letter because that's already been thrown out. The NCAA said
yeah,
no.
They was like, thanks for your letter.
This is a sternly written tweet. That are we sure she wrote?
Probably the social team.
That's what I'm saying. Imagine being the intern that was like, "Hey, your thing today, you gotta craft a 2-tweet thread where at the end of it you threaten war."
Just so weird. It's like, well, then the other part that would be the funniest is if they do this whole stink and like JMU goes 12-0 and they like the NCAA changes their mind and like Air Force is ranked 2 spots ahead of them.
No, the funniest thing would be if the NCAA changes course like going into the App State weekend and they lose.
That would be really funny. Some of the stuff is absolutely cracking me up with all of it. And I guess while we're here, I'll do it too. The game day outrage was too much. It was too much. People were like, how could game day pick a matchup between college football playoff contenders in the Pac-12 over 4-3 ODU that nearly lost to Texas A&M Commerce and JMU, which can't go to a bowl game? What? Like, what do you mean?
I mean, honestly, ESPN probably knew the rule before we did, and that's why it didn't come to JMU.
Among
This
other
also that
reasons.
ruling too takes the App State game off the table. It takes the JMU Georgia State game off the table that I saw
That's
one
not-
Georgia State beat writer
That was
float.
shut up,
Yeah.
Evermore again.
What, we're gonna have all of 3 people in attendance for game day that morning?
I too, as a major media network, when I can pass up an Alabama home game against LSU or Bedlam for the last time it's ever in the Big 12, I would love to go to Georgia State, which can't fill its stadium on a normal Saturday.
Just absolutely insane. I don't agree with the game day outrage.
Everybody's got to just chill about everything. The bowl games, the
I'm
everything.
also kind of like a crotchety old man when it comes to game day at this point. Because I'm like,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
standing outside for 8 hours to cheer when they tell you to cheer, and it's not very fun. Granted, I did tell Eva that, and she was like, yeah, but what about the students? It's a really great opportunity and like a fun experience. And I was like, well, yeah. Now I feel like a crotchety old man, like that's yelling, get off my lawn.
It's
But
cool.
it is a great-
It's cool when it comes. You just can't get mad when they pick like a clearly better football game.
And
That's-
storyline.
Yeah, it's like Utah, like they're competing in the last year of the Pac-12. One of those teams, the winner of that game, is in a good spot to like hang around for college football playoff contention.
John, so am I. So am I. We will be filling there. The 2 of us there, and also Don
going to this one?
Palumbo. I'm going to this one.
That's hilarious.
The 3 of us JMU fans will outnumber Georgia State 3-1.
Yeah, well, maybe you'll get game day. It'll just be a JMU game day.
All right, back to news.
All right, back to news. Kurt Signetti, we've got one Kurt Signetti quote here. This is after the Marshall game. He's talking about a situation after after a punt. No, after the Francis Meehan interception. He goes,
Also, Francis Meehan, one of the better. Like, he needs more.
Dog.
He has 2 picks this year.
3, I think.
3 picks. That's triple the amount of any other safety.
That's right.
Actually, technically, that's wrong because all the other safeties have 0. So technically, triple of 0 would be 0.
Some people are saying he caught more passes in the defensive backfield than Surratt at punt returner. Okay. Kurt Signetti said, he said, we're on the 1 again. And that's when Jordan really had some good information about how we should attack them, which I concurred with and agreed. Like he did it. And that's when it became the Jordan Reggie show for a while. The hell is he talking about?
One, I love that he has the trust in like McLeod bringing him some information. What I think, this is newsworthy, but what I think happened is like he figured out handset. Like, you know, you watch film all week and Marshall like doesn't change its hand signal week from week. And McLeod was probably seeing him check when they were showing a certain run fit, check defensively to cover the holes. And that might be why Black and Lawton weren't getting a lot of rushing yards. But when he noticed that check on defense, he probably checked to something on offense and was like, Reggie, run. They can't guard you one-on-one on the outside. I'm just going to throw it up to you. And that's probably what happened. And then probably there was a drive where Signetti called something to see what would happen and probably confirmed it. Hilarious use of words, though, as in the middle of all of this, a Michigan entire cheating controversy is unraveling about stealing signals. And Signetti, right after this all gets announced, goes on and goes, you got some information.
Yeah.
Which I concurred and agreed with. And then we started playing football. I don't know. I mean, we got some information. That's all I'm going to say. Did we send a scout out 4 days before to watch Marshall's hand signals? I'm not saying no. I'm not. No, he did not do that. I should not. Not in today's day and age, but hilarious.
I also love where he's like, I concurred and agreed with, which almost implies that like McLeod had come over earlier in the season and be like, Coach, they're doing this. He's like, oh, really interesting. And then he like turns to Mike Shanahan and he's like, no. Like, we don't listen to any of that. Like this time he's like, I agreed with it. Yeah, sure.
But
I agree with it. All right, last one. This is from ESPN's Matt Berry during the broadcast.
This was hilarious.
And we're going to talk about what's best for the student athlete. Well, these guys who have worked their butts off all season to get to 7-0, you know what's best for that student athlete? Honor them with a trip to the postseason. Pretty fired up.
I like that whole clip of it. Like, he was getting really worked up. I think it's newsworthy. I also think it's kind of newsworthy. And Dom jumped down my throat when I presented this. I think it's newsworthy that like an ESPN anchor and play-by-play commentator is saying this. Like, this is a thing, a large media company that pays a lot of money to have rights to the NCAA. I know it's all conference by conference, but like, you don't want to be in the bad graces of the NCAA. And ESPN has been very outspoken, specifically Matt Berry in this instance, but a lot of their written pieces too have been very outspoken in saying kind of this is stupid. And so I think it's newsworthy. I think it's very interesting that these large media companies that have to be nice to the NCAA are putting their feet to the fire and then saying, hey, what you're doing about this quote unquote student athlete experience is stupid because you don't actually live up to the mission statement that you say you do. This is not about the student athletes at this point. This is you just upholding a rule. How easy would it be for you just to say, you know, this is a stupid rule. Let's amend it and we'll start now with JMU. Instead, you're holding true to your guns and impacting the lives of all of the JMU football players, all of the Jacksonville State football players. Sam Houston's 0-7, but say they were 7-0. You're negatively impacting all of their, like, they worked 18 years to get to this point, to get a scholarship offer, to play at the Division I level, and they did it. And then their team switched to the FBS, forcing it where they could, out of their control, couldn't play in the postseason. It's the same crap that the CAA did, impacting all of those players. And now the NCAA is doing it to them. And frankly, it's bullshit.
It's also confusing. Why would like moving from the FCS to the FBS be different than like Oklahoma and Texas going
to the Big 12,
the to the SEC? Like it doesn't make a lot of sense that like none of those moves are punished even a little bit. They're actually rewarded.
And it's also it's also more advantageous, I'd argue, to go from the Big 12 to the SEC in terms of the media deals that are different.
It is, yeah.
Going from the CAA to the Sun Belt.
Yeah, it's one where it's like it made a lot of sense for JMU. They have like more fan interest, regional rivalries. They were clearly ready to make the move. That's what doesn't make a lot of sense, is why have a waiver process if like
you're not.
I mean, they can't be any more ready to move. It was very clear they're ready to do it, and they've shown that on the field, and to completely deny it is pretty wild.
Yeah. All right. That was news or snooze. I got a little heated on that last one.
That's great.
That brings us to listener questions, and we got a few. Leading things off, it's Josh Ridgway. If we go undefeated, will we pull a UCF and claim the title?
I hope not.
I hope not either. Everyone hated UCF for that.
Yeah.
And they still do.
Don't do that.
This one's from Dominic Palumbo. When do you think ODU will change their colors to orange and black? I don't think I've ever seen a blue and white monarch before. Have y'all?
The monarch butterfly here is I was referring to. I think it would be a nice change for them. They should have a butterfly game where they go orange and black.
Yes, but we're using the wrong term of monarchs, folks.
And if they released like thousands of monarchs into the air, I think that'd be fun. Every season opener.
Kyle English asked, are y'all as nervous about ODU as I am? No.
Yeah, no, they suck.
They're bad at football. They're feisty. Good for you. A+ for effort. But you got to
throw the records out when rivalry week arrives, unless, of course, they can't stop the pass and they give up more sacks than any other team in the country.
Jalen Green might set a new program record after just setting the program record. Mangy Dog, why are you so opposed to Liberty football being ranked as the team's top VHSL team?
I think they should be. I think they would. Liberty would be super competitive as a high school team in the state.
Look, I went to Massaponax High School in Fredericksburg, Virginia. We had a really good football team for a few years there. I think some of our schedules were more difficult than Liberty football's.
Fair.
Look, we played Joey Sly. He's now a kicker in the NFL. We were playing actual NFL caliber players. I don't think Liberty's played an NFL caliber player all year.
Fair enough.
This is Alex at Alex092975. What are the odds that JMU truly goes undefeated this season? Who poses the biggest challenge in your mind? Also, Who from JMU is in the running for Sunbelt Player of the Year? Sunbelt Player of the Year is probably Jordan McLeod or Jalen Green.
Yeah, you'd have McLeod for offensive, Green for defensive, and then like Hanson and Wise for special teams. They could do a clean sweep possibly there, which is pretty exciting. And then I think 11-1 is pretty realistic, with 12-0 very, very possible. I think undefeated is absolutely right there. And then I would say that Georgia State is probably the biggest threat because they're good. Like they have a solid
Wow.
they have a solid team. ODU's like meh, App State surprisingly meh, Coastal meh, and then like we'll see like how he gets healthy. That was a pretty scary concussion-y hit. We'll see what they look like at the end of the year and sort of their motivation for that one when they're probably going to be out of the Sun Belt East race.
So I'm trying to look up what JMU's probability to be undefeated is according to K Ford Ratings at K Ford Ratings on Twitter.
ESPN gives them a 20.8% chance to win out.
JMU has, I don't think these have been updated since last week. They have not been updated since last week.
Okay.
Still 50% chance to win 11 games.
That's pretty, 20.8 to win out on ESPN. Their projected win total or win-loss, 10.7 wins. So you're looking at like 11 there. It would be kind of disappointing if they don't, to be honest with you, if they don't go.
If they lose more than
11-1.
one, lose more than one game, I'll be sad. And the only game that's left on the schedule that worries me is App State a little bit.
No Georgia State fear.
Sorry, I'm looking for their passing attack. I can't find it. They run the ball really well, but I don't know if you heard JMU allows 1.2 yards per rush.
Per game, some were saying.
Some were saying. I don't know who would say that, but Georgia State worries me a little bit. But the only reason that it was a 42-40 game last year was because JMU decided to hand them 4 touchdowns.
You think double-digit favorite rest of the way?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know about App State.
At least a touchdown, though, right?
I think a touchdown in all of them.
Yeah,
because App is at home.
That's pretty significant. I also think if Georgia State loses to Georgia Southern and that one, they start to look a little less frisky. The point that's worth noting is they lost at home to Troy by 21. Troy's got a very similar makeup to JMU with just a worse passing offense.
Yeah.
Right. They stop the run, play really good defense, kind of grind you out. I don't know. It seems like a great matchup for JMU. But
Hall Jones, any update on Latrell Palmer?
No.
No.
It seems like they've just gone away from the running game, and he was kind of third in line. So,
yeah, and Wayne Knight wasn't even in line. That's why he's now entered the transfer portal.
Yeah.
In case you guys haven't seen that tweet, please just look up Wayne Knight's transfer portal announcement. It's a good one. Oppie, Meerkat 1457. Which team is the biggest obstacle to an undefeated season? I think it's App.
I'll stick with Georgia State just because it's on the road.
The revenge factor, does that play anything into it for you?
Could, and then, their coach is just a sociopath, which is always sort of like a loose cannon, right?
Well, he's a sociopath that hasn't been coaching for his job up to this point.
Who are you saying is the sociopath?
Sean Clark.
I was saying Elliott with Georgia State. I was like, I don't think he's a sociopath. That's an interesting point. Could Sean Clark pull, Sean Elliott? Could he pull a Sean Elliott and start acting like a psychopath before games? Like his players are really confused and just slamming helmets to his head. He's like, ah! If he does that, I think they could win out.
I love Coach Elliott. He works up the biggest sweat I've ever seen from a coach.
How funny would it be? How much would you pay to force Signetti to do 5 minutes of that pregame? I'd pay a lot, a few hundred.
No money, because of the focus is on being 1-0 every week. And we're not going 1-0 every week if Kurt Signetti's too worried about a paycheck to go do some performative hyping up. That's some bullshit.
He's just smacking his own head and stuff. God, that'd be awesome.
And last podcast, we talked a little bit about volleyball. I thought we needed a little bit of a potentially sad volleyball update. I'm not sure how it impacts their at-large chances. I think it almost
not great.
Annihilates it. They just lost back-to-back games in Conway, South Carolina against the Chanticleers. Coastal's a very good volleyball team.
They are.
But a very tough loss. They lost in straight sets on Friday, and then they lost 3-2. They lost 15-8 in the deciding set 5. So a tough weekend for volleyball, but they can get back in the winning column. They got Georgia Southern up next. Then they got Marshall, both of those at home, and then South Alabama to finish out on the road in Mobile.
Field hockey, you're still on my list, 3-11. I have concerns.
Yeah, I would hope
if anybody
so.
wants to talk about them, slide in the DMs. We'll hash it out. We'll figure out what's up. Women's soccer, they're good at not allowing goals, still working on scoring goals. Men's soccer, maybe they're in the postseason mix. I don't know. Kind of fringy. They had that great start, and they've won a couple in a row now to get a little bit back on track. So we'll see if they also have
is a tough men's soccer company.
My God, yeah, really tough.
And Jaylon Lee from JMU Baseball signed with the Missoula Paddleheads of the Pioneer League. All right.
you and your minor league baseball.
For Bennett Conlon, my name is Jack Fitzpatrick. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the JMU Sports News Podcast presented by Bet Online. We'll see you guys next week. See ya.